Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss. I'm joined as ever by Jonathan Fadugba. This is episode number 101. How are you doing, pal?
Hi Steve, hi everybody. Hope you enjoyed our 100th episode, and I'm glad to be with you this evening or this morning or whenever you listen to it. Steve, I'm good. It's been a really action-packed weekend, to be honest, in Sweden. So we've got a very special show for you today, and we're going to break it into two parts.
Yes, we certainly are. We're going to be, this first section is more sort of action on the field in both Allsvenskan and Eliteserien, and also the European results that have been going on across the board. In part two, we're going to be talking about solely transfers in both leagues again. So we're sort of splitting the two sections up, and we're going to start here with goings on in the Allsvenskan, and it really revolves around one huge match in Stockholm derby, the Allsvenskan against AIK, and rather a stunning outcome, Jonathan.
Yeah, it's a great place to start, and I have to say it's probably one of the most eventful games of the year. It always is. It's the Stockholm derby, Djurgården AIK, and that's where we're going to start this week's show. I have to say, Steve, it's probably how do I describe this? It's like something I've not really seen before, if that makes sense. It was an incredible game. I think the first thing to say about it, before we get into the score and everything, fans back was a massive thing. 9,000 fans. Okay, it wasn't packed. There were bits of empty areas in the stadium, but nothing really beats a Stockholm derby with a packed house. 9,000 fans had to do, and it did do. Before the game, it was the usual kind of Swedish ceremony of flares and smoke bombs and everything like that. It was back to what we know from that point of view. The game was delayed because of the flares, which always seems to happen in these derbies. The games always seem to kick off, always seem to be delayed. You tune in and you're like, what's going on? And then you realize that there's some flares holding it up. The first 10 minutes is always played to like a puff of smoke. You can't even see Henrik Goitom's goal in the 7th minute. If you watch the highlights, you can barely see the ball because all you can see is smoke clouds everywhere on the pitch. Games have been suspended in the past because of low visibility for the players, because there's so much smoke and plumes and everything like that. The fire, you can see the flares in the background when Goitom scored his first goal, these red flares from the AIK fans. So it really is a momentous occasion. If you can ever watch these games, or if you can ever get to a Stockholm derby, I really encourage it, because they are real spectacles of Swedish football. And this one was a stunning affair. Really, it ended 4-1 to AIK in Djurgården's back garden, and there's been some fallout to this match. Bearing in mind, we went into the game with Djurgården were fighting to get to the top of the table. Malmo had drawn, and Djurgården knew they could close the gap with a win against their big rivals, but it didn't go that way at all. AIK absolutely battered them. Goitom scored the first. Radetinak equalized from kind of a set piece, but Seb Larsson, the veteran, with a kind of Ronaldinho-esque against David Seaman goal from a free kick. He pretended like he was going to cross it. Was it a cross? Was it a shot? Who knows? And he fired it straight over the head of the keeper, who was a bit of a keeper howler. He's had to come out and kind of apologize, tail between his legs. And then Stefanelli made it 3-1. With a nice finish, a neat finish, but the cream of the crop probably for AIK fans, the goal that really had them, how can I say, the cat with the cream was Milosevic's goal in the 78th minute to make it 4-1. It was a set piece. He was there to fire it home, and Steve, he does what every fan dreams of in these sort of derbies. He scored his goal, and as you know, it's a bullet headed from a corner. And he ran probably a full 100 yards, Adebayor style, to the away fans, and just simply cupped his ears together as if to say, "Can you hear me?" And the fans have been sharing that meme all over social media. That was the sort of the iconic image of the derby, just AIK rubbing it into Djurgården's face. Social media has popped off. I can tell you that now, Steve. AIK fans are like cats with the cream. Djurgården are despondent. I've never seen a club so despondent on social media, genuinely. And we're going to talk about the reason why shortly, aren't we? Because there's a backstory to this.
This is a bit of a shock result, I think, because before this game, Djurgården had only conceded 8 goals. They were joint top of the table. If they'd won, they could have gone 3 points clear. The result actually has big ramifications. Malmo and Djurgården on 30 points each. Suddenly, AIK are in the title race. They're only 3 points behind. And, Elfsborg, even they're not ruled out. They're only 4 points adrift. So, really significant result, which... I mean, did you see that coming? I mean, we know they've got a terrible record in derby matches. We know that. We're going to talk about that. But to me, that's a shock.
Big shock. And no, I did not see this coming in any way, shape, or form, if I'm honest. You've rightly pointed out just then. Djurgården went into this game knowing if they won, they'd be top of the table. Malmo had drawn, like I say, at Halmstad. I think they'd given it away a little bit. We'll maybe talk about Malmo in a minute. But they rested players ahead of their big sort of European match, and it backfired. They drew a middling Halmstad team who were a wily team, but Malmo were expected to win that and didn't. So the gamble of resting players backfired, and it meant that Djurgården knew going into this game, win it, and you're top of the table. And we're one game away now from halfway through the season, so that's not to be sniffed at. Halfway through the season to be top. As you've also rightly pointed out, they'd conceded 8 goals in 13 games prior to this match. I remember you praised them last week for their defensive record on the last show. And then in one game, they concede 50% of that tally. And AIK aren't even really huge goal scorers, to be honest. I mean, they before this game, they'd scored 17, which is lower than, it's sort of average, really. I mean, if you take this game out of it in isolation, Östersund's at bottom of the league, and they've scored 15. So, going into the game, AIK weren't this team that's firing on all cylinders, but they really took them apart. I mean, it kind of unraveled in the second half, in terms of the goals. And a lot of them, like I say, the set pieces, they were goals that you have to look at it from Djurgården's point of view in terms of the defending of set pieces. That kind of thing was really, really, really slack. But the big story here, Steve, is the record and the context behind it, because the background to this, Steve, is just... I'm going to read out to you the stats in a minute. In terms of Djurgården's just terrible record. We've talked about it in years past, the ghost of Stockholm that haunts Djurgården in these derbies. And I'm going to read to you firstly. I'm laughing before I read this, because some of the comments on Twitter from fans that, Djurgården fans have been up in arms, and I mean up in arms. But let me first just read you the background, the record. Djurgården's record in Stockholm derbies. We'll take Hammarby and AIK. Against AIK, who beat them 4-1, as I said. 22 games in the last 10 years. 3 wins. They won 1 game in the 2018 Cup. They won 1 game in 2020. And then you have to go back as far as 2011 for their last game before that. So that's 3 wins in a decade in 22 matches against AIK. I mean, that is dominance. And you think to yourself, okay, AIK are dominant against Djurgården, but it can't be that bad, can it? With the other Stockholm team, this is their record against Hammarby, another team based in Stockholm. 22 games, exactly the same outcome, 3 wins. So that's 6 wins in 44 matches in the derbies in 10 years. That one against Hammarby stretches back to 2009. Hammarby were relegated in that year. But they've only won 3 games: 2007, 2018, and 2019 in the Cup. A dreadful record for Djurgården, and that really has created this storm, despite them being, like I say, at the moment second in the table.
You'd feel sick, wouldn't you? I remember, I think it was Saint Etienne in France had a very similar record against Lyon for a long time. They just couldn't beat them. And it really, when you can't beat your biggest rivals in your own city or very close by, then you're going to be pig sick, aren't you? It's as simple as that. And well, I actually don't believe much in football head-to-heads. A lot of people ask me betting advice and tips, and one of the first questions that always comes up is, how seriously do you take head-to-head records? Answer is, I don't take them very seriously at all. But there are always exceptions, and for me, the exceptions are in derby games and when it gets like this, because that is when it becomes, for me, mental. It's got to be a mental thing for the players. They're going to be reminded about it every time before a derby game. And it sounds to me like it probably got into their heads again, unfortunately, for Djurgården's sake. And Can they rebound from this? They probably can, I suppose, but it's a bitter blow.
Yeah, I mean, 6 wins in approaching 50 matches in derbies, and don't forget, Djurgården have won titles in this period of time. They won the league the season before last. So it's not as if they're a small team against these big boys. It's not like, let's say West Ham against an Arsenal or a Chelsea, where you're like, okay, you accept the fact that you're the lesser. Djurgården consider themselves to be equals to AIK and to be above Hammarby, really. So this record it almost defies logic in some ways. Now I'm going to read you one of the comments, and that's the reason I laugh. I'll see if I can get through this comment without laughing. So one of the things I like to do, Steve, being the sad case I am, is whenever teams get battered in these sort of games, or whenever there's a shock result, I have to admit I do have a bit of a guilty pleasure of going on social media, going through Twitter, and reading the comments from fans when let's say when a goal goes in, or when the final results announced, that kind of thing, just to gauge the mood. I'm just going to read you a comment from @NoVardy1 when Djurgården conceded the 4th goal and announced it on Twitter.
Go on.
I'm going to try not to laugh at this. How shall I explain? How shall I explain this to my children? That we are a fucking soft ice cream association. It is your fault my children will be bullied at school and do not dare wear Djurgården clothes to school. Shame on you.
But that's the thing, though, isn't it? It becomes, when it's a match like this, it's not just a result. It's the whole pride of your families and your schools and your workplaces. It comes into factor, doesn't it? They're going to be embarrassed.
Yeah, I mean, listen. I mean, that tweet got nearly 500 likes and 117 retweets. Now, I don't know if it was an AIK fan kind of basically trolling, and if he really meant that. But, generally, you scroll through the comments at the full-time whistle and during when the 4th goal went in, and it's generally that kind of thing. You should be ashamed of yourselves. There's been other comments from fans, DIF Stockholm, Tom Y, who we actually follow on Twitter. He said, the team should be ashamed of themselves collectively, and he was basically saying, don't abuse players individually, but as a collective, this team is a disgrace. Players are getting really called out on Twitter as well, of course, as you can imagine this day and age, on social media, things like that. Joel Asoro, who I've wrote a Wisecat blog on, he's having a tough time this season, I'll be honest. Not really filled up the expectations. Chilufya is in a bit of a bad run. Magnus Eriksson, who was player of the month in Allsvenskan, he went missing. AIK fans have been loving that. They've been ripping it into the Djurgården podcasts. Like wherever you go at the moment, it's like social media warfare. AIK fans, they're out there and they're rubbing it in, just as you do in typical derby fashion. But the Djurgården just didn't turn up. There was a statement put out earlier tonight, which I'll just read to you quickly if I can. It was said that, hang on one second, I'm just going to get you the statement that was put out from a Djurgården supporters group. It says, "We have had to live with this shame for 10 years. Our players keep exposing us to this shame. It is time to say no. From now on, this is unacceptable in derbies. Every player wearing our shirt, we will not support you in any way unless you give something back to us. We require blood, sweat, and tears from our players playing in a derby for our club. We demand an excuse from all of them, including management. We demand a roadmap to get this solved. We, the fans of DIF, enough is enough." Signed by the Ultras and the other groups supporting Djurgården. And the translation there is from @Putter64. So thank you so much for your translation there. This just sums up the move, Steve. The tweet was read in capital letters, "Enough is enough," of that statement. DIF fans, and this is what I mean about the context, because they're second in the table. You think to yourself, well, they're in the title race, looking fairly good. But this defeat and the manner of it, in terms of the way they've lost AIK, it's really riled the club's fans. They are fuming. 6 wins in 44 games, and they are absolutely furious. And just to cap that off, what you got to also bear in mind here is that AIK fans, AIK like to think of themselves as that. DIF like to think of themselves as competing with AIK. They have that eternal rivalry. They really do not like each other. And AIK, the way that when they always think to themselves, no matter how bad it gets, we're better than Djurgården. Do you know what I mean? That's the mentality of AIK. And these kind of games, they're lower in the table. AIK had a terrible season last year. Don't forget, Djurgården weren't, Djurgården were okay, didn't win the league, but they won it the season before that. AIK have had a tough year or so. They've taken some beatings in the league, and this this feeling they have is kind of like, no matter how bad things get, we're still better than Djurgården. And that's what they, sort of showed in that derby, winning 4-1, and their fans are just absolutely loving it.
I mean, it kind of suggests from those tweets that they've lacked that blood, sweat, and tears over the years. Maybe that's where they struggled in terms of the results. And I mean, we'll move on now. But I mean, in terms of the actual title race, I mean, do you see it being? I mean, how impactful is that? Can AIK? They're 3 points behind Malmo now. Who is the more likely of these two teams to win the gold medal? Would you say?
It's an interesting question because I think the underlying numbers, you'd probably still look at Djurgården. But I think there's real psychological damage here, and I think that's the thing that really makes this game so compelling, and why we've talked about it for quite a while. This is a sort of turning point type match. You get games sometimes in the season where perceptions just go out the window and things completely spin on their head. And I just get the feeling that's kind of where we are now. Bartosz Grzelak came out after the game, and he was absolutely buzzing. This game, like I said, was played in front of 9,000 fans. He said, this is a reward for our fans. He said, we're not going to get too cocky. There's a real feeling of like, we're AIK are back now. That's the feeling at this moment in time. And of course, that will get inflated because it's a derby. And, when you beat your biggest rivals in such a way, when you batter your biggest rivals, you're going to be on cloud nine for a good week or so. But really, what it's done is it's shown them that they're not that far off it now. So Alexander Milosevic came out afterwards, the guy who scored the goal, and cupped his fans his hands to the crowd, cupped his ears to the crowd. He said, we can't get too cocky. We have to focus game by game. We have to continue to work hard and be humble. But what Grzelak has said, I think it is quite telling. He said, it could be a lifetime experience for us. We talked about enjoying it. The feeling is that we're very nice. Many of our players have been sort of, there's a new feeling triggered in our players by this. We handled it very well with positive energy. And I said to the boys, let's make this a day to remember. And the big thing he said is it means a lot for our self-confidence. If you look at the team in last season, he said it was a quote unquote shitty year for us. It's been about stabilizing things and then trying to build something. We've continued building and building and building, and this victory means a lot for our supporters and our club, and it gives us the next mental step. And I think that's the key there, really. This is a mental victory for AIK in terms of psychologically. They can now go into the rest of the season. And, like we said, they're 3 points off the top of the table now. So from that point of view, it's massive. But also just that boost it gives them in terms of, we can compete with the big boys. We can compete with Djurgården. And let's carry it on from here, because don't forget they lost to Häcken, they lost to Norrköping, lost to IFK, drew with Malmo. So this will really give them a lot of confidence. The next few games they've got Sirius, Häcken, Örebro, and Mjällby. So if they win those 4, for example, then they really could consider themselves in the title race for sure.
Yeah, there is certainly a race because Malmo have dropped points, 0-0 draw away against Halmstad. And I mean, I mention Halmstad every episode. They are absolutely boring bastards, aren't they? 12 out of 14 matches ended under 2.5 goals. Their matches average just 1.5 goals in them. At home, it's unbelievable, Jonathan. 7 matches, 7 games have ended under 2.5 goals. A total of just 7 goals in total in them 7 games. I mean, but they find a way to shithouse teams, don't they? They get these 0-0 draws. I mean, I dread to think how many 0-0 draws they've had. It feels like half their games have ended 0-0. They're really hard to play against, aren't they? Especially for favourites. Hard team to break down in that 4-4-2 system. But I mean, Malmo, I think you said they rested some players off air to me. We're going to talk about the Champions League match against Rangers soon. But will they regret them 2 drop points, do you think?
I think they could well end up, that could well end up costing them the title, to be honest. They I'm not going to say they're complacent, Malmo, but I just sense this kind of, they're not taking the league that seriously at this moment in time. I think they've got their eye elsewhere. And I think, if they beat Rangers and they go through it, or you could maybe say that it's vindicated, but they've rested Kolak in 2 of the last 3 games now. And, he's their top goal scorer and he's a fantastic player. And I'm just wondering in my mind, like, what? All right, it was okay against Mjällby, I think it was. they managed to get away with it. They are battering teams, and in the last, they beat Degerfors 5-0, Sirius 4-0. But that Halmstad game obviously is drop points they didn't need to drop. And let's see where they go from there. The next game's the EFK at home, and maybe if they qualify, it will be considered to be worth it. But they are being caught up a little bit. So yeah, I do think they gotta keep that in mind. Obviously, their focus is Europe. They've got a desire to be, go as far as they can in European competition, and who can blame them from that point of view. But yeah, it will be a bit of a setback, and especially if they don't go through against Rangers. I mean, one thing I just wanted to say as well before we move on that title race talk. Not only is this loss for Djurgården a psychological blow, there is a little bit of pressure now on their manager Kim Bergström. I think this is there's a lot of question marks now just from the fans in terms of what is this, and I really think it's psychologically a massive blow because it didn't really need to be this kind of big question marks about everybody and the manager and stuff. There's been so many comments about the manager, the players in the last day or so, and they're going to have to rebound from that quite quickly. And the other thing, we're going to talk about transfers in part 2. We're going to have a bumper discussion about all the transfers going on, so stay tuned for that in part 2. You don't want to miss it. But one thing, obviously might as well say it now, Aslak von Witry, who I said on the last show is pound for pound the best player in Allsvenskan, he's just gone today as well, to make matters worse for Djurgården. So their best player's just left to AZ Alkmaar. Now, because you have him in your fantasy team, he's been probably the best player in the league for some time. We'll talk about him in part 2 in terms of what he's done in the league, but him leaving as well now, that's a hole for Djurgården. They're going to have to fill it quickly because he's been a massive, massive player for them. So Malmo will still feel like they can win the league. They've got a new signing as well, which we'll talk about in part 2, but they've got a few things to think about now. They've got a big game, Hammarby away, 29th of August, and then the big one really 19th September against Djurgården at home. So they need to just make sure they don't take their eye off the ball.
Yeah, other results for round 14. We're nearly at the halfway stage in the Allsvenskan. Norrköping 1, Kalmar 2, Varberg 0, Sirius 0, Djurgården 1, AIK 4, Elfsborg 3, Degerfors 0, Häcken 5, Ostersund 0, IFK Göteborg, Hammarby and Halmstad Malmo both ending 0-0, and Örebro 2, Mjällby 2. Quite a few draws, around 3 0-0s in total. A weird old week actually, Jonathan. Seemed like a few drab matches, but a few with quite a few goals in them. What else kind of stood out for you from that round of fixtures?
Yeah, well, I was very frustrated by EFK Hammarby. I thought there'd be goals in that game, and if you look at some of the stats from that game, I mean, it was ridiculous. Could have been about 4-2 in about 10 minutes alone. There were some big chances missed from both sides. Hit the post, hit the bar. Marcus Berg hit the crossbar. There were huge chances in that game. I was really surprised it ended 0-0. I also fancied Hammarby to maybe win it, but they just didn't have that cutting edge. EFK is the first draw. It's the first 0-0. It's the first game without conceding, I think, since May 30th. So Mickey Starr is starting to impact a little bit. I think his maybe slightly more conservative style. The numbers are starting to turn a little bit in terms of EFK. They're looking a little bit more solid. I think he's registered less crosses, slightly more goals on average since he's joined. So we're starting to get a little bit of data in terms of how he's impacting the team. So yeah, 0-0. I think there was a bit of a. I didn't really reflect the game. I thought it could have been a lot more goals in that, and should have been. And the other game that caught my eye that I watched was Norrköping Kalmar. Now Kalmar are in really good form, having a very good season. And Nils Frolling. Now I wrote about him for Y Scout about a year ago now in terms of talents to watch, and he had quite a big injury last season and kept him out for quite some time, and he missed chunks of the season. But he's back at it now. And I always think it's funny. He turned down Norrköping about a year ago, and he came up today and popped up with 2 goals to win it, 2-1 away from home. The win takes Kalmar level with Norrköping. They're both 6th and 7th now. Kalmar slightly worse goal difference, but both on 20 points from 14 games. Both identical goals conceded, 15. But Norrköping slightly more goals scored. But Frolling adds goals and he adds quality. I think he's an expiring contract, so I'm really keen to see who he can attract because I think he could play for a top Allsvenskan club, and if not, maybe move abroad. But let's not talk down Kalmar because they're having a very good season under Rydström, and Usually, isn't it, Steve? We talk about them as maybe 13th, 14th or something like that. They're looking way above that this season, and can even maybe look towards top 5 potentially if they carry on this run. So, yeah, well done to Kalmar. They're really looking good. Norrköping, I'm a little bit. I wouldn't say critical of them, but they 6 wins, 6 defeats, same number of defeats as the teams like say Varberg boys. That they are a little bit, hit and miss, and I think there's 1 or 2 players in that team who they're just not quite getting the best out of. I think Bergman Johannesson, talked about him so much last season. I think he's shown a little bit of a dip this season in terms of his output. I think he didn't have the best of games as well. And I thought to myself watching the game, I thought, he's second season syndrome maybe is sort of hitting him a bit. But massive win for Kalmar. They're doing really well.
Yeah, well done to Kalmar. Norrköping, I think we kind of expected maybe some teething problems this first season under Norling, didn't we? But some interesting stuff there.
Just need to give one last shout out on to Häcken. Their manager Per Mattias Hagmo has won Allsvenskan Manager of the Month. They've absolutely battered Östersund's 5-0. They're back on track. They really are at the moment. Häcken, they're looking decent, very, very decent indeed. Leo Bengtsson, one of my 10 to watch this season, is back on the score sheet, 2 goals. Dalaho Irundus is back as well. He's on the score sheet. Tobias Heinz even got a goal. So, Häcken, we talked so much, didn't we, about them being an exciting team full of attacking players. Hogmo is really managing to gel that attacking unit together. And for Östersund's, I have to say, Steve, I think they're going down. I think they look adrift at the moment, just totally bereft. But yeah, really, really, really big win for Häcken. They're doing really well.
Yeah, the fair play to them. They rebounded well, especially after the Europa Conference League nightmare against Aberdeen. So, and talking the Conference League, like I said, there were some really weird results across the whole of Europe, I must say. TNS, for example, the Welsh side there had a shock win. There was a few other shocks around. Not so good for the Swedish sides in this competition. Elfsborg, they could only manage a draw against a team from the Bosnian League. And Hammarby lost 3-1 against Kokoriki from Serbia. Kukariki, sorry, fucking hell. Bloody hell, I had to edit that one. Kukariki from Serbia, they lost 3-1, but we've still got the second legs to play on Thursday. The big game was in the Champions League qualifiers. Malmo beat Scottish champions Rangers 2-1, and it was nearly better. A very late goal from Rangers looked like it was going to be 2-0 Malmo, and it's all to play for at Ibrox in the second leg. How do you see things going there in Scotland, Jonathan? It's a big game for both clubs, and Celtic are already out of this competition. It wouldn't be good for Scottish football if Rangers suddenly got knocked out by Malmo, would it?
Yeah, well, I saw that Dundee beat Rangers at the weekend, so a slip up there for Gerrard, and obviously they lost against Malmo. I think it was a close game overall, all things considered. I think that they Rangers were lucky to get away with that sort of late goal. I think it was 95th minute, was it 96th minute? But I read that they've kind of announced that there'll be a full house. Rangers will be totally full capacity for this game. There's going to be a fiery atmosphere. That'll be tough for Malmo to deal with. I think it will suit Malmo from the sense of, Malmo are quite they like to play a sort of compact style. They're quite a compact unit. They can play in different formations, of course, but I think they probably will go for a repeat of that sort of 5-3-2 setup. They were quite conservative against Rangers in the way they set up. Rangers had 55% possession, sort of dominated it slightly from that point of view. Relatively even in terms of shots, but more passes, that kind of thing. But I think from Malmo's point of view, I think it kind of suits them when they can play on the back foot. So the question is, can they withstand that pressure that they'll come under? Because they will be under a little bit of pressure, I think. I think they will find it difficult to withstand Rangers. I've read that Morelos will be back and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's going to be a massive game, and there's a lot at stake there, isn't there, really? Champions League, both sides, it means a lot for them. So I think it's going to be a really, really entertaining game. I mean, I expect it to be kind of fairly similar lineup and approach. Christensen was rested against Halmstad. Kolak was rested. Bergman Savic was rested. I'm sure they'll come back into the side. And, in that sort of 5-3-2, if they play that system again, they'll probably look to kind of soak up pressure from Rangers and try and hit them on the counter with the sort of creativity of Berman Savic and obviously the attacking thrust of Kolat. So I'd say buckle yourselves in. This will be an exciting game.
Yeah, I think it's really got the makings of going all the way, maybe even extra time and penalties. And I know Jon Dahl Tomasson was asked by the media before the game, is there more pressure on Malmo instead of Rangers? It was a bizarre question, and he's gone and said that he thinks that there's a lot more pressure on Rangers because they need the money. Simple as that. I mean, there's talk about the finances in Scottish football, and Rangers is not that great, is it? I think there's a lot of pressure on them to reach the group stages of Europe, perhaps the Champions League. So, full house there at Ibrox. But if it goes against them, it could be a difficult one for Steven Gerrard. I'm looking forward to watching that game. Actually, I think it's going to be a really close one. Jonathan, do you have a prediction?
I want to back Malmo. But I think a packed house, Celtic and Rangers, when they have the crowd behind them in these home games. I mean, Celtic beat Barca once, didn't they? They can give them an extra 5% or so, and I think Malmo are going to have to withstand that because they've played for a good year or so without that kind of intense crowd to deal with, with COVID and everything. So it's going to be sort of something they're not that used to. Funnily enough, the last time Malmo beat Rangers, they went bankrupt 12 months later. So I think that's part of the reason he made those comments. It was Malmo that knocked the Scottish club out in the qualifying rounds. And as I say, then that led to Rangers' downfall, didn't it? And them going bankrupt and everything. So yeah, heart says Malmo, head says Rangers.
Yeah, I'd probably go Rangers after extra time or something if I had to. It's going to be an interesting one. Just going to go over a few of the results from the Scandinavian teams in Europe. Breidablik, the one remaining Icelandic team, lost against Aberdeen 3-2. Aberdeen, a bit of a Scandinavian killer, aren't they? Recently, knocked Viking out last year, and it looks like they're going to knock a couple of teams out this year again. There was Lokomotiv Plovdiv drew 1-1 against FC Copenhagen. 1-1, which is a bit of a shock result. You'd expect FCK to turn it around, wouldn't you? Second leg there. Buda Glimt had a shock loss in Kosovo to a team called Pristina. 2-1, really disappointing from Buda Glimt, but they would hope to get that back in the second leg. Rosenborg with a 6-1 against Domzale. I'd imagine they're not going to have any trouble there in the second leg. Molde had an incredible 3-3 draw against Trabzonspor, which I will talk about in a minute. And I think that's it in terms of the Scandinavian sides in the Conference League anyway. I probably missed someone somewhere, but good and bad results. Sort of a mixed bag, really, Jonathan.
Yeah, a mixed result, a mixed bag. We'll see if the team can turn it around. I know that, for example, been interesting few comments from Anders Christiansen. He's really criticised the Malmo play. He's really criticised the Allsvenskan, actually, the organisers of the league. He said it baffles me why we can't play on Friday nights or earlier on the day and Saturday. They've had to, obviously they've got a Tuesday match, and he's really annoyed about the scheduling. He thinks it's too close to the game, the kickoff and everything like that. An afternoon kickoff. He said, I don't know if Swedish football does not want Swedish teams in Europe, but it is very strange. But yeah, he said that Midtjylland, for example, had 4 days rest between their games. He's saying, why don't they do that in Sweden? Why don't they help these teams get into Europe? So he's been complaining. Obviously, Hammarby, like you said, lost. Elfsborg drew. So, he's really tried to emphasize the fact that they need those extra days rest to recover. Because, in Allsvenskan, there's no Friday games, for example. And that most of the games are sort of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes even Monday. So, he really had quite a bit of a rant, actually. He said, if you play every 3 days, there's a big difference in recovery. 4 days is much better for the body. You recover faster. It makes a big difference. Every hour counts. If you're traveling, you have travel days, hours by bus, plane. Every hour counts. So he's really had a rant about sort of Swedish football in general and what are they doing to help these teams do well in Europe. So, does that have a factor? Perhaps it does. But in this case, I'm pretty sure Rangers played as well on Saturday, so there's not much difference really between the two sides. I know they're at home, but let's see if they can just deal with that. It's probably part of the game, isn't it, at this point?
Yeah, like the Eliteserien has definitely made big strides in the last 2 or 3 years to try and help their sides in Europe. They make sure that the teams around this time of year have 3 weeks in the league to really focus on. And I think it's worked in the last few years, Norway's had some decent success. They've got teams deeper than you would expect them to in European competitions. And already, even in these qualifiers, things have been going fairly well. So there was a couple of results I missed off. It was the Finnish sides, because HJK are in the Europa League qualifiers right now. They got a really good 2-2 draw away against Netsi Baku over there in Azerbaijan. Second leg to come, and Cups with a 1-1 draw against Astana, Kazakhstani outfit. It's going to be tough going that far there for the second leg, but you never know, do you? Maybe they can qualify as well. And there's 3-3 that Molde had against Trabzonspor. I watched this game, and I was stunned by what I saw. For a start, I was shocked pre-game that Trabzonspor were favourites. They were odds-on favourites, 1.85. Now, I've got to be honest, Turkish football is not the strongest league in the world, is it? I don't rate Turkish football. It's one of those leagues I like to kind of laugh about, really, because it's been terrible in recent years. No one seems to go very well for them, do they, in Europe? And I thought Molde deserved a bit more respect, really, as they reached the last 16 in Europa League last year. But I've got to be honest with you, they were lucky to get out of here with a 3-3 draw, Jonathan. Trabzonspor played incredibly well. They should have scored at least 6 goals. They created an incredible amount of chances. And I don't know whether this side has been got some sort of sugar daddy or something, or they've managed to get some good players in. And they had Jovinho at the right wing. I didn't even realise he was there. They've got Hamsik, obviously, in the side as well. A few other guys that look decent. And this is a much tougher draw than I thought it would be for Molde. Come up, I thought, bloody hell. It's this is a nice, easy draw, but they did well get the 3-3 out of it, and it's the return leg in Norway. So, yeah, we've got an interesting tie coming up.
Okay, great stuff. That's Europe covered. So let's look at. There wasn't a full round in Eliteserien this week, but let's just recap. Half the round was played in July, end of July, and half the round was played this week, as there've been cup games, haven't there, in the last week or so. Big shout out to Sean Constable, by the way, who had a famous win, which we talked about on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. But I'll just read you the scoreline, Steve, and then maybe you want to talk about 1 or 2 games that caught your eye. So this is from Sunday, the 8th of August. Mjøndalen 2, Tromsø 3, Molde 5, Haugesund 4, Sandefjord 1, Lillestrøm 1, Viking 3, Kristiansand 2, and Stabæk 3, Sarpsborg 1. Take it away, Steve. Which games sort of were you able to catch? Which games caught your eye?
Every game caught my eye. I was watching all of them, and they were all good games. It was wild football. I mean, even the Sandefjord game, that should not have ended 1-1. There should have been, let's just say, over 2.5 goal backers would have been pretty unhappy about the outcome there. I mean, the Molde match was 3-3, but half an hour. Crazy stuff going on. I don't know whether it's because a lot of these teams have not been playing much recently, but something was in the air for goals. Like, no one could defend at all on Sunday, and obviously the Molde match was I noticed you had to take a bit of a pause of breath after reading that one out, almost in surprise. It was one of them first halves where literally every chance just went in the back of the net, though. Probably the most significant result was Mjøndalen 2, Tromsø 3, massive 6-pointer down the bottom of the table. I'm starting to get worried for Mjøndalen now. I just think they lack football quality in terms of, technique and everything compared to some of these sides at the bottom. Stabæk with 2 straight wins now under Eirik Schoner. Very good win against Sarpsborg. And I'm starting to worry about Sarpsborg as well. Lars Behinen's had 2 wins in 11 games since he took over. He looked far more solid under Mickey Stara. They were boring under Stara, but they were far more solid and probably drafted a few more results out. And, Behinen got relegated, didn't he, under Allsvenskan? Or effectively did before he got sacked. A bit worried for Sarpsborg there. But yeah, the significance is that Stabæk obviously recovering really well now. Brann are rock bottom. They've not been in action recently, but they're rock bottom. And the Viking match against Kristiansand was an exciting game. So Yeah, some good football going on, Jonathan, and impacted both ends of the table.
Yeah, I'm going to read you two numbers now, and I'm going to see if they ring any bells for you. 69 and 95.
Well, 69 can mean many different things, can't it? As for 95,
Careful.
I don't know.
They are our positions in the Nordic Football Podcast Fantasy Eliteserien League at present. So you're not having the best of seasons, mate.
I've had a really poor year in the Norwegian. I've been happy with my performance in the Allsvenskan fantasy, far better than I thought I'd be. But I've just not had. It's not my year in Eliteserien fantasy, I'm afraid. I've had the odd good week, but I've been really poor with some of my players that I've put in. I've missed a boat on. I mean, I've not had OE in my team all year because I just expected him to dry up at some point, but he's just kept scoring more and more goals. I've made some good transfers, but I've had a really shocking fantasy, mate.
Yeah, I won't go into. I mean, I won't complain because I'm way worse. But yeah, I'm quite surprised to see you down there, and you've got 80 points in the last round, so you maybe you're showing green shoots of improvements. But yeah, not having not a great year for the Nordic Football Podcast in general in the Eliteserien fantasy. There were a few results in this weekend, Steve. Where, we have to give a shout out to Eric Schörner. He's doing quite well, isn't he? I saw one of the goals, and it was very sort of very nice sort of tiki-taka style against Salzburg. They really seem to be picking up some results.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Starbec's recovery so far. I think it's been a slow process. He's not just come in first game and immediately got a result. It's been a build-up of a few games. He's used the Norwegian Cup well, I think, in terms of results. Grab a couple of tight wins, but a win's a win, isn't it? It gets your confidence going. There's been a few new transfers in the club. I think I said a couple of weeks ago, didn't I? The mentality impressed me the most against Mjøndalen. You wouldn't expect them to beat Mjøndalen in terms of digging in and physical and grinding and that sort of style of football. So I think that's what he's delivered the most. Bear in mind, I predicted Starbek quite high in this pre-season preview, didn't I? It was like 6th or 7th. So there was never really a lack of, I think, footballing quality within the squad. So I think he's kind of harnessing now the potential that was always there. And they look really on a positive trend. It wouldn't surprise me if they started keep racking those points up. Really, they're looking in a lot better state than sort of like Brann or Mjøndalen or Tromsø right now to me. And if he keeps this up, they're gonna comfortably survive. There was a question on Twitter from David Weatherston at dweatherston11. Starbek's current revival, what's changed? Edvardsen looking like the guy I thought he would this season recently. Thoughts on his progression? Well, yeah, hopefully I answered the first part of that question, David. Regarding Edvardsen, he has just stormed into life recently. I think perhaps the player himself has maybe found it more comfortable under Eric Schörner, and I think the new manager has put him in a position where he can thrive. I've noticed him putting some really good balls through to him. He's using his pace and his movement, breaking the offside trap, things like that. Just a few positional changes, which I think has made a big difference for Edvardsen. But I saw some people on Twitter, some Vålerenga fans were saying, you know what, why don't we go in for this Edvardsen? We could do far worse than getting this lad in. And it can. I've seen this happen before in Norway and Sweden, in other parts of Scandinavia, where a player just suddenly comes up suddenly into everyone's eye line. It just has a habit of happening. I'm not saying this hasn't come out of nowhere at all with Edvardsen. I think there was always going to be something with him, but it just feels like recently he's really progressed. So he's been a big part of their revival. I certainly can see them really progressing nicely.
Yeah, and Viking as well. They impressed you.
Yeah, the Viking are really up and down. They're like up and down like a yo-yo, mate. They win and lose a lot. Tends to be all or nothing with Viking. I think kind of what we expected of them this year. That they're going to probably finish around mid-table. Exciting side to watch. You know, they're not boring. They go for the goals. 27 goals scored, 29 conceded is a ridiculous number. And they probably lead the league in terms of average goals per game. Yeah, 4 goals per game their matches contain, which is ridiculous. 12 out of 14 matches have ended over 2.5 goals. I mean, if you want a 0-0, this is not the place to come, is it? So, yeah, really good side to watch on the day. I'm pleased that they got a win against Kristiansund because, Kristiansund annoy me with their overachievement sometimes. So, yeah, well done to Viking there. And it's got them to 8th in the table. And I'm looking forward to now the full rounds of fixtures are coming again now, Jonathan. We've had too many bit part rounds where 5 matches or 4 matches or 6 or 7 matches. Now every round, I'm pretty sure, bar a couple of them, is going to be every team's in action until the rest of the season, barring like postponements, cancellations, and things like that. We're into the second half of the season very soon.
Yep.
Let's get on with it.
Let's get on with it, indeed.
Yeah, and just before we finish this section, there's a few other questions that I want to answer. RVP at Elmagomata on Twitter, he asks, or it might be a she, I don't know, the best underdog story so far this season. Well, definitely for me in the Eliteserien, it would be Sandefjord, because I think everyone said they're going to be rock bottom without Marti Cifuentes as manager, and so far I think they've got 20 points. They're going along very nicely indeed. So I'd say that is the best underdog story. Michael John at Michael19721111 on Twitter asks, you mentioned recently that there were more draws than normal in the Eliteserien this season. Is there any particular reason for that? Well, I've actually just gone back and looked at the stats, and I may be a bit incorrect actually, because in 2019 there was 30% of matches ended draws. So far we're only at 27% this season for draws, and last season it was 24% draws. So there hasn't been as many draws in the last couple of rounds, so that's brought it down a little bit. But 27% draws is probably around about the sort of figure we might expect, maybe a couple of percentiles lower than that. I mean, 30% of draws in 2019, that was a hell of a lot, really, when you think about it. Much higher than I would normally expect, really. We've got a question from Chris Hillian. We're going to answer that in the second part of the episode, so stay tuned, Chris, and we'll answer that one about Mulder and stuff. Matty Lewis asks some really interesting stuff about Strømsgodset. He says, Matty Lewis 11 on Twitter. Thank you very much for the question. Big Sam tactics at Strømsgodset. 21 big chances missed. Highest amount of long passes, 860. Third highest shots on target per match. Leaders of possession won in the final third. Is there more to the side from Drammen despite the figures looking quite Route 1? Discuss. Really intriguing one. It's actually got me thinking. I might do some sort of tactical analysis on this team coming up in the next few weeks, because I noticed actually some of these long pass stats there when I was looking recently, and it's one of those where actually if I'm watching them play, it's not as obvious as you think to note. When I watch Strømsgodset play, I don't think Route 1 football. I don't think of this sort of Big Sam side. So clearly the stats are sort of don't really mix with what is playing out in your mind regarding the team. They certainly play a high tempo pressing system, so that doesn't surprise me that the leaders of possession won in the final third. That part certainly makes sense, and third highest shots on target per match kind of makes sense as well. They're a bit sort of scattergunnish, if you know what I mean. But in terms of the direct and long range passing, I can't say I noticed probably maybe as much as I could. 21 big chances missed. They've created opportunities. Some of the clinicality's not been there. Fred Friday at one point was a very different player away from home than he was at home. He's missed definitely some big opportunities away from home. So really interesting stuff, Matty. Thanks very much for that question. And the final one, which I'm going to answer in this section, was from Team Overs. Team Overs, thanks very much for your support over the years, by the way. Which team, regardless of league, has the best home field advantage? In Norwegian terms, for me, it's Molde. They just got this really strong record at the Arcade Stadium in the last 2-3 years. I think heading into this season, they won 25 out of 30 fixtures here. They've won all bar one this year. So in total, it's something like 32 wins out of 38 at home in the league anyway. So I would say Molde, traditionally in some geographic terms, you're looking at Tromsø down the years. There was a massive disparity between their home and away results. I'm not saying it was an exceptional home record, but they would overachieve at home compared to what you might expect. That seems to have changed in like the last 3 or 4 seasons they've been in Norway. So I don't know really what the difference is. Maybe just teams are more used to travelling these days or things like that. But traditionally that would be a really awkward place.
Yeah, definitely. I think that probably wraps it up for part one. But in part two, the main emphasis is going to be transfers. We're going to look at the window's about to close in Sweden. And I think the window's still open for a little while longer in Norway, but it's very much open at this moment in time, isn't it? We're going to get our yellow ties on like Jim White, and we are going to analyze the deadlines and the transfers that are going on. Because I can say one thing for sure: Scandinavia at this moment in time is like John Lewis on Christmas Eve. It's really a shopping bonanza. So we will cover all the major transfers in part two, so that you're very much up to date with the big movers and shakers, because there's been a lot of other leagues pecking our league like flies, pecking our league like hens, haven't they? So let's catch up on all that in part two and give you everything you need to know about who's leaving and who's joining. So tune in and join us after this short break. Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. We are now going to dip into transfers. So this is going to be, we've had a nice part one, really, haven't we? But this is where it gets a bit more juicy. The midway point of the season in terms of the league, the transfer window in Sweden closes 11th of August. So by the time you listen to it, it may well have slammed shut. Whereas in Norway, I think they've still got a little bit more time, which Steve will talk about in a second. But yeah, we've had a lot of business, and it's one of the things we talked about when we got to episode 100, wasn't it, Steve? How there's been a sort of a groundswell of interest in these leagues as we've been doing this podcast over the years, and it's not because of us, I don't think, because also because of the quality of the league, and people are seeing there's a lot of gems in this part of the world, and really we're seeing that reflected in the market, aren't we? At the moment, there's been a hell of a lot of activity in Norway, which is where we're going to start. I'm going to start you off, I'm going to start you off, Steve, with a question from Chris, one of our regular listeners, at Footy and Chris. I see what you've done there, Chris Hilliam. He talks about a transfer, but it's also molded in with a question about Molde. So I'll read the full thing out. You guys touched on Molde's XG last week, and they've since conceded 3 to Trabzonspor, which should have been more, and then 4 to Haugesund. So are there defensive issues there, which mean they aren't quite as clear-cut favourites for the gold? On top of this, how will they adapt to life without Åsnes, and does it provide the opportunity to change things in order to stop conceding so many chances? Cheers. Now, I'm not saying you have to answer all that, Steve. Maybe briefly you want to touch on the title chances, but it does kick us off in terms of transfers, because Molde have been a very busy team, haven't they? And they've sold 2 of their players to the Netherlands. Now, and one of them that Chris mentions there, Fredrik Åsnes, a defensive midfielder, has gone to Feyenoord for a good fee there, isn't it? It's meant to be about 1 million euros roughly. What can you tell us about him? Will he be missed? And also Marcus Holmgren Pedersen, who's gone to Feyenoord as well.
Yeah, welcome to part 2. This is where it gets interesting for me as well. One of my cats has managed to sit on top of me at the back of my chair, and you know what happens when those animals get a bit funny sometimes. So be warned, Jonathan. I may be disturbed at some point, but
if your listeners hear a loud scream, then it's not me. It's going to be Steve, perhaps getting clawed.
It's my girl cat. She's usually pretty damn good, so she's all right. But it's interesting she's come and sat on me now. But thanks very much for the question, Chris. And you know what? First of all, regarding the Molde defensive thing, I think it's just because there's been a build-up of games and they're in Europe and things like that. Certainly the Haugesund game, I think they took their eye off the ball a bit. and focusing on Trabzonspor. Trabzonspor, just like I said, they played really well. I think Trabzonspor are quite a good team from what I saw. But Feyenoord have come knocking on the door of Molde, which is interesting, isn't it? Marcus Holmgren Pedersen, I think I've talked about him before. As for Fredrik Orsnes, well, he's been a key player for Molde in the last couple of years. He's more of a defensive midfielder, but he can play pretty much anywhere in that middle of the park or even out wide, actually. What's my best sort of role description of Orsnes? Oh, God, it's really hard to say, actually. Yeah, I wouldn't call him box-to-box. I certainly wouldn't call him like a deep-line playmaker either. It's a difficult one to say what he is. Central midfielder. He does a bit of everything, really. But he's 25-year-old. He's approaching sort of that prime age of his career where he needed to sort of move away to a better league. And probably the Eredivisie is a good choice. Feyenoord, a big club, aren't they, there? And I was actually watching them in their Europa League game, Conference League game the other day, actually. They, well-supported club. And obviously they're focusing their attentions on Norway. And I think it's a good signing for Feyenoord. I think Molde could have maybe got double that fee, really. I think he's probably worth more. I rate him quite highly.
And they've replaced, they've got one replacement, Sivert Mansverk. Now, we were going to talk about him on a previous show, weren't we, Stephen? You kind of requested to put it into this transfer bumper show. So tell us about him, because there's been quite a bit of hype about him on social media.
I don't know. I don't actually know a lot about him because, like I've said before, I don't really follow Bundesliga much. It's one of those things. For example, Ben Wells, who's covered that league for numerous years, has been, wax lyrical about Mansverk for a long time. And by the sounds of it, the expectation was probably in the off season that he would move away from Norway. He's that good, So I think it's quite a coup of a signing for Molde, that a young talent from Sogndal in the Bundesliga is staying in the country, and most sources that you hear about would suggest he's probably only going to be at Molde for a couple of years max. He's that good. Let's see how he does for them. It looks like a very good signing, and you're replacing like for like. And I've said before, the best clubs in domestic leagues, they always raid their fellow clubs domestically. Whether it be in the top league or the second tier. I think it's good business. Rosenborg used to do this for years in Norway. And Molde have been really impressed with their transfer dealings in the last 3 or 4 years in general. They're well run in that regard.
Yeah, well, what we can tell you about Mansverk, he's already played 3 games now for Molde, but 50 games in the Bundesliga and 54 games in total for Sogndal, 6 goals, 6 assists from central midfield positions. He's played for Norway's under-18s. So clearly some talent there for the 19-year-old. Maybe it can something to be developed, and there does seem to be a bit of a buzz about him. So keep an eye on him. Do Molde need to do any more business?
I think they've got to obviously think long term about replacing Ohi, who will leave to Red Star Belgrade in the winter. So they need to think about a striker long term, but not yet. As for the rest, there's still 3 more weeks left in the Norwegian transfer window. 31st of August teams have got until. I don't see them losing anyone else now. So I don't. If they had to do any more business, I would say maybe centre back could be an area because Gregerson can sometimes get injured. You could say probably right back actually if Harold Side's injury is going to be more long term than we initially thought. So yeah, right back or centre back is where I would say Molde need to perhaps look at. But they seem well covered in all other areas right now. They've got good depth in this squad, and it's looking quite good.
Okay, let's move on. One team who hasn't been that active, so you can maybe brush past them fairly quickly, I guess. It's the champions, Bodø Glimt. They've brought in 1 player, haven't they? With no outgoings as yet.
Yeah, Joel Mugisha from Sane. Again, it's I need to start watching more of Bundesliga matches, don't I? But I just don't really have enough time. But Fadugba, I'm certainly not one to question their transfers. They've brought some guys in from the lower leagues before, and they've done really well. I don't know. I think it's unfair for me to comment on these players that I just haven't seen enough of. But Joe Mugisha, I'm sure he's one to watch out for. 18-year-old centre midfielder from Asane, and Fadugba don't need to do an awful lot either, really, in the transfer window at this point in time. I think it would do them good just to keep hold of their key players. And go again in the winter. If you had to pick an area, you would say probably right wing, maybe, because of Sondre Sole's season-long injury. But apart from that, I would say if they just keep the squad together, it's job done.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some talk about him. There's people saying that he's insanely good. I've seen on Twitter some things like that they predict he's going to be potentially a £5 million transfer in a few years. There's one comment on Twitter saying that. Rumors about he has a heart defect. I don't know about that, but I don't want to make any speculation from that point of view. So yeah, a bit of an unknown quantity. Perhaps someone will keep an eye on. Joel Mugisha from Asane looks like certainly someone who's raised eyebrows. A team that has been very active, Steve, is Vålerenga, haven't they? Both in and out. There's been quite a bit of movement.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of these outgoings certainly caught even your eye, Jonathan, really, as just a neutral in terms of football. Christopher Claassen to Leeds United for 1.8 million. Aaron Dunham to Standard Liège for an unbelievably cheap fee of 1.35 million. What's that all about? Samad Akugbe is on his bike as well to the Turkish league. Hatayspor, £360,000. They've also lost Felix Hornmeier to Brian. They brought 3 new guys in as well. I'm going to talk about soon. But, Dunham too. We always knew we were going to lose Aaron Dunham this season. It was just a question of when, either be it the summer or the end of the year. It's no surprise he's gone to Belgium, Standard Liège there. 1.35 million. That just seems like daylight robbery to me. I would say he's worth double that. He's an unbelievable talent. Great player, rating really highly. I think he can go on to potentially really big things. You're 23 years old. Maybe that's a reason. Contracts as well. I don't know exactly how long he had left, but that looks a fantastic piece of business for Standard Liège, I must say.
Yeah, and you mentioned, how good is Donham? Because I've seen some highlights of him in Standard Liège already, doing fairly well. Is he as good as, how far can he go? He looks top.
I think he could go high. He could play in some of the top European leagues, I think, with the right development. He's got it all really physically, mentally. He's developed nicely. Some might say he perhaps stayed 6 months longer than he should have done in Norway. But maybe that was to do with like COVID and stuff. Maybe he couldn't quite find the deal he wanted last year. Feels like he's at the right age now to develop. I was watching Bordeaux against Clermont the weekend in Liga. You got Elba Rashani came off the bench for Clermont and set up a goal. Now, Donham and Rashani are very similar players, and if Rashani's ending up in Liga, then there's no reason why Donham can't at least reach that level. So I think the future's very bright for Donham. He's a technical master, and I wish him well. And I think he'll go to somewhere better and bigger than Standard Liège in time.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of the general feeling. There's been a few other departures at
Sam Adekugbe is a big loss because I think he's just a solid, dependable left back who they've replaced him with someone called Leonard Zuta. And now I actually checked out this guy's profile on Football Manager because I knew nothing about him at all. They've got him from Lecce in Serie B in Italy. He actually his profile on Football Manager looked quite good. Now I'm doing a bit of a big Sam here, aren't I? Checking this guy out, but in theory, on paper, he looks like an all right replacement. But I really liked Adekugbe. I think he was a solid player for them. Christopher Claassen to Leeds, my own club. I'd say I was kind of pleased with this deal because I rate this keeper. I think what he needs now is good coaching, top class coaching. I think he'll get that at Leeds for sure. He needs to develop his technical skills, both on the ball and in terms of goalkeeping. And you can't get that really high elite class coaching in a place like Norway. You can't do it. So he'll come to Leeds as a backup to Meslier, and hopefully he will really improve as a goalkeeper for at least probably playing the cup matches and maybe the odd game when Meslier gets injured. But I'm really interested to see his development as a player, because I think his ceiling is quite high. I think there's a lot of room for his potential to grow. It's a good move for him. And I don't necessarily think he needs to be playing first team football. That's the good thing for Klaassen. I think he just needs the coaching level to be high to improve him as a player that way. 1.8 million seems like a reasonable fee at this point in his career.
Got a work permit, did he?
Yes, it was on appeal. It was to do with he would have been playing games for Norway or in the Norwegian squad had it not been for COVID. So Leeds found a way around that, which was obviously good. 1.8 million. As I say, I think that's an okay fee for Vålerenga. I'm sure there'll be some sort of percentage on that as well going forward. Good move for both parties, really. But a big blow for Vålerenga to lose their keeper like that, obviously, as well.
Yeah, Zutter, he's played 80 plus games for Häcken. Good, decent, solid left back. Really got a move to Italy, and obviously then maybe it hasn't quite worked out Italy. But yeah, he was a solid player in Allsvenskan for Häcken. So I think he'll probably go quite well in Norway. For a bit of experience as well. 29. You've also signed Albin Morfelt, who's come from Varberg Boys. Now he hasn't played that much Allsvenskan, but in the games he played, he was very exciting. He looks like a young prospect. For Vålerenga to watch out for. Their 21 years old right winger, and also a player from FC Copenhagen, Nikolai Thompson, 28-year-old left midfield on a free. So some business there for Vålerenga. Will this affect their season chances?
Yeah, I think now it's unrealistic to expect them to be challenging for medals, because it's like the whole core of their team's been ripped out, Jonathan. When they lose a key player from all areas of the field, it's too much to expect them now. I think they've got to rebuild again and make sure they need to replace Klaassen, I think, long term.
Do you think they'll lose more before the window ends?
I don't think they will now. Surely, if they lose more, although if they are going to lose players, probably might as well do it now all in one go, right? And then in the future, they can maybe have a year or two more of stability. Nikolai Thompson, he does actually have a Danish cap to his name. I don't know much about this player. He's 28-year-old. Maybe he can be quite good. Again, I don't know enough about him.
Yeah, it sounds like they've got a lot of work to do, though, doesn't it? I mean,
they do have a lot of work to do. I think.
Let's move on. Rosenborg have been fairly active.
They have, but I think really the big loss is Christopher Zacharias and Ferencvaros. Ferencvaros always seem to do good business, by the way, around the whole world. I'm impressed with that club. But 1.35 million they've lost him to there. It seems like a little bit, probably about $250,000 less than I would have hoped they would have got for him. He's been their best player for the last two seasons, so to lose him is massive. A couple of players have gone on loans as well, I think, out of the club. They've brought in Ola Skarsheim from Kristiansand. Bit of an underrated player, actually. Versatile midfielder, can play anywhere. He might be able to shine at Rosenborg, I'm not sure. They have brought in a centre forward from Vitória Guimarães called Noah Jean Holm. I know nothing about this player, so let's see how he gets on. But yeah, really, it's about Zachariason's departure, how they're gonna cope without him, and whether Skarsheim comes in and makes an immediate impact. That's the big question.
Yeah, and of the players who've left, I mean, we'll run through it quite quickly because we can't really cover every team really on this show. But who are the biggest losses, do you think? Because I'm looking at some of these players who've left. You've got some quite big names, haven't we? Dauda Bamba's gone from Brann as one example. He's gone to Turkey. You've got my man Bruno
Bakenga.
We talked about him. Yeah, Shaga Bakenga. I was going to say, who apart from Donham, who are the big departures?
Yeah, Bamba's a massive loss for Brann. He was their top scorer this year. The only player really that can have any credit from the season, I would say, so far. In terms of goals as well, Musha Bakenga he's gone to Japan of all places, a place called Tokushima Vortis. They're not even in. I don't even think they're in the top league in Japan. J1 league. Is that the top tier there? I'm not entirely sure. But Bukenga had said going into the season he wanted to leave this year. Didn't affect his production. He's one of those professionals who got on with the job and scored goals. I just don't see how they suddenly replace someone who's just been an absolutely goal-hungry machine in the last sort of 12 months. And at the moment, they haven't replaced him. So I worry for Odd in that regard. Those are probably the two that stand out big to me, aside from the other teams. Mikko Desla, as well, to Toulouse for nearly £500,000. Great signing for Toulouse. Desla, arguably the most consistent right back in the league in the last 2-3 seasons. Really impressed with him. I suppose £500,000 is quite a lot of money, isn't it, for Haugesund? They can't really turn that down, can they? Especially if the player wanted to move on to a big club. But they've done well. They've signed Alexander Sutherland's come in. He used to play for them back in the day, 34-year-old. I do rate Sutherland, good poacher. And Martin Samuelsson's back as well from Hull City. I mean, he's had more clubs than Tiger Woods, hasn't he, Samuelsson? But he was quite good on loan here a couple of years ago. So maybe he can do well for Hull. Still only 24-year-old. But, Odd, I'm worried for them. I worry for Vålerenga's dealings that they've got to recover quickly. And can Rosenborg bounce back without Zachariasen?
Okay, fantastic stuff. And we'll move on shortly. Just to wrap it up. I mean, there are a few interesting signings. I think my Traore I like at Viking. My Traore. What I would like to ask you is in terms of the if we're looking at the league table and the second half of the season to come, we're nearly 15 games in now. Some teams have played 15. The transfer window so far, who are going to be the winners and losers at this point in time? Who could be the ones who move up? Who can move down? Because you've mentioned Vålerenga there, probably might move down. It's currently 7th. Who has anyone done business that's going to really define their season?
I think Brann. You look at Brann, they've got to do a lot, and they've brought in Bård Finne from Sunday SK in Denmark. I probably pronounced that wrong, but Bård Finne was at Vålerenga for a long time. Did well there. Sivert Helter Nielsen has come back. They've never really been the same since he left, actually, have they? He's such a key player for them. He was in defensive midfielder there. He looks like a good signing. Jafet Seri, a centre-back, 21-year-old centre-back from FC Midtjylland. They've also raided Midtjylland for a keeper, Mikkel Andersen. And Felix Horn-Myra from Vålerenga's, I think, quite a good signing. So Brann have brought 5 guys in. They've lost Bamba, and they've lost John Helga to Vita as well, and a couple of others to loans. But Brann could benefit. They could certainly... If they can find ways to replace Bamba's goals, and let's be honest, Bamba wasn't always the most clinical, even this season. So maybe if someone who converts their chances better, like maybe Finne can be the man. They could be a winner of the transfer market. Stabæk have been very active. They've signed an abundance of players. I want to mention Tom Pettersson, who's come in to Lillestrøm. But I think you say teams that might miss out. I think you can't just sit still. There's a lot of activity so far, and we're still 3 weeks left in the window. I've never known anything like it, actually, to be honest. It's normally the amount of transfers we've seen now is usually what it's like over the whole window. So I think the teams that are sitting still, like Sandefjord, Sarpsborg are pretty inactive. Strømsgodset haven't really done much. Mjøndalen have done a couple of things. Tromsø, I brought in Christoph Cichet, an old fantasy favourite. But the teams can't sit still, Jonathan. They've got to keep looking for players, I think, and otherwise they can fall behind.
Yep, that's a fantastic analysis.
Yeah, and that's pretty much wrapping up the Eliteserien transfer section. So stay tuned. We are going to be talking about the Allsvenskan transfer window, which is virtually nearly done after this short break. Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. Well, so far I've stayed intact, Jonathan. I've not been attacked by my cat. The Allsvenskan transfer window we're going to talk about now, and it's It ends on the 11th of August, so very soon. So far, departures have apparently generated £17 million, and the arrivals have only totaled £1.4 million. So it's obviously a window of, well, as usual, players exiting the league, sadly.
Exodus, movement of people, and that is pretty much what has been happening in Sweden, and I think similar thing to Norway as well. In the classic words of Bob Marley, really, been a bit of an exodus. I think in Eliteserien, if I'm right in saying, they've raised about £10 million, and expenditure's been very, very little. So it is what it is. We know that some of these fees are undisclosed and things like that, but roughly speaking, it is about kind of the ratio of 10 to 1 ish, really, in terms of ins versus outs, and Sweden's no different. Been some big moves, and I think I discussed sort of in pre-season that there'd been a trend of players sort of the recruitment at the moment has been very much from lower leagues of Sweden, really, in terms of incomings. Obviously now with COVID started to ease off a bit, clubs can be a little bit more experimental in their signings, which some clubs have been. We'll talk about Hacken maybe, for example, in a minute, and other teams who have maybe dipped into foreign markets. But generally speaking, clubs have really, it's been outgoings rather than incomings, and there's been some big names leaving the league.
Yeah, the most expensive transfer according to Transfermarkt was, we talked about it before, Said Haskabanovic fetched nearly £6 million for Norrköping to Rubin Kazan. Like you said, a lot of these transfers, the undisclosed fees, so you can only really use 17 million as a rough guide. But let's just talk about sort of the big clubs, because their season now is pretty much defined in terms of the obviously deadline day. We're not able to cover that because we're recording before it. But Malmo then. We actually had a question, I do believe, about one of their players that have come in. There've been certainly a few loans have come back, a few of the transfers in. No one really significantly out of the club. Do you think they're at the moment well set for the rest of the season?
Yeah, there's been they've been pretty active. I think that if we look at their incomings, they probably did need one or two names. I think they've strengthened their centre back position with the signing of the veteran Niklas Moisander from Werder Bremen on a free transfer. He's already played. He played against Rangers, for example. He's played in the Champions League. He's had a very, very solid career. Malmo do tend to kind of go for tried and trusted at times. Jonas Knudsen, for example, they got from Ipswich Town. They do like to sort of get those players that they know something about at times, and that's what they've done. Of course, he's played in Allsvenskan already. If you look at his career, been at Ajax, been at Sampdoria, Werder Bremen, very, very experienced player. He's won titles abroad. So, they've brought him in on a kind of a year and a half contract just to fit into that back line. He can sort of play across the back five, if that makes sense. He can play in a back three, or he can maybe play in a back four. So slightly versatile there. The other name that's kind of caught the attention is Sergio Pena. Now he's a 25-year-old attacking midfielder from FC Emmen. Paid roughly £900,000 for him, which is quite a lot, according to Transfermarkt. I think he's a player who, the other player they've bought is Peter Guargis from Brighton's 23. So I've actually seen play as part of a consultancy work I do, looking at the PL2, and I caught him in a game for Brighton's 23s, and he's I have to say I'm quite surprised Brighton. I'm surprised that Malmo have signed him. Maybe it's one for the future. I know he has got heart. I think he's got Swedish heritage. He's a sort of left-footed winger who can kind of play on the right, cutting inside onto his left foot, but I can't see him really making a huge impact. Maybe this season it'll be one for the future. They've also got Malik Abubakari, who has come in and from Portugal, and he's already made a bit of an impact. He's played 3 games in Allsvenskan already. He looks like he's going to be a solid sort of starter, really, the Ghanaian. So they've really kind of looked to strengthen key areas of their team. And as I mentioned, in terms of Pena, he's going to be expected to be, Malmo have scored goals okay this season. They haven't been too bad, but I still think they can be at times a little bit, lacking in creativity, especially if Berman Savic isn't on it. I think Berman Savage and Kolak have really added some bite to Malmo and some youth as well, some energy. And I think Pena will also do that. I saw a couple of comments about this player. I don't know much about him myself, I'll be honest, but we got a quote from someone called Marcus Bring, who on Twitter is a very good guy. He tweets a lot of analysis and things like that. He said he's an above average creator compared to his peers in the Netherlands, one of the most progressive central midfielders in the entire league, an attacking midfielder who likes to drop deep and support the build-up play. And he posted a kind of stats radar, and in terms of his passing statistics, in terms of the league's average, he was way above the league's average. Pena, averaging sort of about 83% passing completion. Successful defensive actions, he's averaging about 7.3. Passes into the box about 3.1 per game, 3.3-ish per game sort of thing. So very much a creator, very much someone who can create and progress play. And I think that's kind of maybe what they need in that attacking midfield area, someone who can just add a little bit more. So yeah, I'm excited to see how he gets on. I think he's one that will entertain Malmo fans. And just on the outgoings, one of my 10 to watchers actually left. He's gone to Mjällby. Sarr. I thought he could have a breakthrough season this year, but he's really, I think my rationale was right. They do need pace. Malmo, they did need a bit more energy in forward positions, but rather than play their academy players like Sarr, they've obviously dipped into the transfer market and bought players like Pena and Guargis and Abu Bakari. So Sarr's gone to Mjällby on loan. He'll try and continue his development. They're still very young, 20 years old. But Malmo have really looked to solidify their first team, which will probably help them go to that next level.
Yeah, he still might have that breakthrough season, Sarr. So, and thanks to Nick Nielsen Bean, who asked the question about thoughts on Malmo's new signing, Pena. Hope that gives you a little bit more information about him there, Nick. Let's move on to Djurgården's transfer window. It's not the most active. I've got a question for you, actually. Per Christian Brathwaite, what actually went wrong for him at Djurgården? Because he's at Nîmes in France now on loan for the whole season. He looks pretty damn good to me still. I never understand why it didn't work out for him in Stockholm. But obviously the big transfer from Djurgården is Aslak von Witry to AZ Alkmaar.
Yeah, just to answer on Brathwaite, I think it's a loan move. He'll be back. They have quite a few keepers. Djurgården. At the moment, Zetterström's playing. He's a player now. He had a really serious injury, and he's now sort of wearing a Petr Cech style kind of cap. He was out for quite a long time, had like serious migraines, things like that. His career was in jeopardy at one point, the youngster, and he's really recovered well to kind of recontinue his career. They also have Tommy Vaiho, of course, the veteran. They have Vasiutin, who then did ligaments and was out for like a long period of time. So they are a bit of a strange team, really, in terms of their goalkeeping options. They seem to always have like quite a few options, and I think that just led to them allowing Brathwaite to leave, if I'm honest. In terms of Witry, this is a big story. And this is we mentioned it in part one of how this could affect the league. He for me is, like I've said it before, pound for pound, the best player in the league. He's finally gone now to AZ. I said it in the last show. I can't believe no one signed him. Maybe AZ Alkmaar were listening to that episode because they've paid the money now. It's roughly between 1.5 and 2 million pounds, roughly euros, to take him to the Netherlands Eredivisie. Someone asked on Twitter earlier, can he get to that level of Eredivisie in Europe? I think he can, definitely. And it's a shame for the league because he's a fantastic player to watch. I've really enjoyed watching him ever since he joined the league, the Norwegian. He's now 25. I think it's the right time to move, if I'm totally honest. I think he risks stagnating maybe. He could have maybe gone to the end of this season and tried to win another title, but ultimately, I don't think any fans can begrudge him moving on now to such a big club like Alkmaar, who have done really good recruitment, by the way, in Scandinavia. And when you will look at it, in total, 77 games, 1 league title, 13 goals, 12 assists from a right back. I mean, that is incredible numbers. 25 goal contributions in 77 games for a right back is, you know, I've called him in the past the Trent Alexander-Arnold of this league, and he really is going forward. He's exceptional. He's really a real threat down the right side. Great crosser of the ball, good creator, progresses the play well, and is also a good defender. So, you know, can't begrudge him the move. Pound for pound, as I say, I think he's been consistently over a number of years one of the top players in this league, and he'll be missed.
I mean, AZ Alkmaar, you mentioned there. I mean, that's just nothing for them. They've just received about 17 million from Monaco for Myron Bourdou, the striker. So they've got money to burn there. And based on what I saw of Bourdou's debut from Monaco, they're laughing all the way to the bank for getting that amount of money for him.
He'll prove himself, by the way.
You think he will come good? I mean, you can't base someone on one game, can you? But
he played against Hacken in Europe and absolutely ripped them to pieces for AZ. He'll come good, no doubt about it.
But they certainly, you know, they're a club that sniff around Scandinavia a lot, aren't they? And also Eastern Europe, I do believe. Witchery, obviously losing him for Djurgården's massive. We talked about that earlier in the show. You also say that he could really. What's the ceiling for Witchery then? Do you think? What sort of level can he play at?
Champions League for a top Eredivisie club, definitely. I could see him potentially moving to a PSV or an Ajax if it doesn't work out at Alkmaar, if they don't sort of progress. If he doesn't do it there himself, you know, because they've got, you know, like you said, they reinvest quite well, and they do like to tap the Scandinavian market. I mean, it's not only him; they got quite a few. Jesper Karlsson, obviously, who used to be at Elfsborg. You'll remember him. They got Hakon Evjen, don't forget as well. So they are definitely scouting these leagues. We know that. I think international level as well with Norway, he can do quite well. I think he'll be fine in Alkmaar. I think he'll find his place. He'll have a bit of competition, no doubt about it. But I think he can find his level there. And not quite sure if we'll see him in the Premier League. The only thing I'd say is maybe pace-wise, he may be just lacking top speed for maybe a Premier League club, but I think he could certainly maybe play Serie A, somewhere like that, Bundesliga, if he was to progress on. I really rate him highly. I think he's a brilliant player at this level. Too good for Allsvenskan ultimately.
Yeah, and how do Djurgården replace him? I mean, are you expecting them sort of on deadline day to bring someone in, or have they got players within the squad who will take over?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one thing that's happened with Djurgården is with the Witchy transfer, they've been really highly praised for their business there. You know, that was a fantastic bit of scouting, really. And I think Bossa Anderson, you know, it'll be up to him to maybe try and find another gem. They have been active in the market to try and bring in players, but they've actually loaned quite a few of them out. You know, Isaac Heen, for example, came in. There were a few others who came in, you know, in pre-season that they thought maybe could come in and, you know, be an eventual replacement in the back line. I'm not sure, like Leo Kornic, people like that. I'm not sure if they're ready, but certainly they're always looking at Djurgården. So Kornic's probably the one that I would say he could get a chance now. Is he ready? I'm not sure, but I think it was you that told me that he's fairly highly rated by the people at Grorud, Eric Schoen, I think it was, on the podcast. So let's see.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what happens there. Let's stay in Stockholm. AIK, not that much business so far. They have pocketed nearly 2 million for Paulos Abraham. I think he was already on loan at Groningen anyway, wasn't he? 1.35 million supposedly for Eric Karl to Aarhus GF, and a couple of lads in, one from the English leagues.
Yeah, a bit of a strange one, this one. Zach El Bouzedi. I have to say, I don't know huge amounts about him. I think he was at Bolton for a while and Lincoln City. I really don't know where this has come from. Bit of an interesting one. He's already played, you know, quite a few games in Allsvenskan, 4 games already now. So he's going to be part of their first team. I just don't know how the scouting went on this one. So it's quite fascinating. If you did scout him, get in touch with us, you know, get on the show. But the key thing really for AIK is a goalkeeper. They're going to be very happy about that signing. Christopher Nordveld. He's been at Swansea, of course, in the past. He's joined from Turkey. 32-year-old experienced player. Obviously he's a Swedish player himself, so he's back home. They really needed a top keeper if they're going to compete for the league. You know, the goalkeeping situation has been a real thorn for them for too long this season. There's been so many goalkeeping howlers from Janosevic. God bless him. You know, he's just had a terrible, terrible season, and he's looked. You know, players sometimes when they're in bad form, they get the jitters, and he has had the Mr. Bojangles for quite some time now. You know, he's really. It's just almost painful at times because you can tell he's lacking confidence, but he's trying his best. But there's just been error after error, and they've had no choice but to dip into the market, and Neufeld brings that experience. So two decent signings there, and with Carl, good player, but they have Eric Etoyeno, the Kenyan, so they were always competing, those two. So one of them was always going to get sold, really, and it's Carl. Carl will have a very good time of it in Denmark. He can go on and be a very good. I think he got an assist on his debut. I think Football in Denmark tweeted about it. But yeah, good player, Carl, and probably a bit of a shame to see him go really so quickly. Only 19.
Did the clubs like AIK and Djurgården and Hammarby, do they need to keep selling these players just to keep their finances in order? Really, is it just that? Is that sort of where we are in life at the moment?
Definitely with COVID, they've had no fans for quite some time. These are clubs that need fans really. You know, it's not like the Premier League where you have big broadcasting deals or the big 5 leagues. The broadcast deals are quite small in these leagues. So match day income is a significant portion of clubs' income. So if that can't be there, then transfer income is the next sort of natural route alongside commercial deals. But even commercial, you know, in the last year have been problematic. So yeah, this will be a period of sales, even more so than maybe normal, like you said. You know, 17 million already leaving the league. But I think that's part of a strategy for clubs to bring players from the sort of second and third divisions. And I think that's where that's where the market is right now. The clubs are kind of trying to be creative, get cheap players in, like I said, Leo Kornic, Isaac Hine at Djurgården, young players like that, maybe to try and find the next Witchery instead of buying ready-made product, which I don't mind. I think it's a good thing. You know, you look at Elfsborg, they've lost Akumu, who we've talked about, one of the top players in the league. EF Core sort of gone for more veteran players. Marcus Berg has come in, you know, 34 years old. Oscar Wendt, Gustav Svensson, 35. Wendt, 34, Svensson. You know, they have gone completely opposite. You know, they used to be all about their academy, and now they're suddenly, you know, turned into an old people's home. Tollinson's gone, the 18-year-old. He's finally left to Lommel. Alisson Yusuf has been one of the best players in the league for some time, the youngster. He's now in Antwerp. I saw they had a massive win at the weekend and he played, so good luck to the Nigerian. Probably a good move for him. So yeah, I think clubs have to be quite creative, and there will be a period of selling your top players. And one thing we know, Steve, in terms of trends, a lot of these players end up back in the league anyway. So, you know, you look at Bjorn Paulsen, he's back at Hammarby now, scoring goals again, you know, from the Bundesliga 2. So there'll be that market still for these clubs to sort of get players who don't succeed potentially back. So, you know, that's probably where we are. Nasiru Mohamed's back at Hacken, for example, after his time in Bulgaria. You know, so people do sort of seem to leave and then come back eventually. But yeah, it probably will be a little bit accentuated in this particular window, maybe next window. But we're seeing little signs that things are going slightly back to normal now in terms of, you know, a little bit of money there now, a little bit of money's coming in, fans are back slightly, so green shoots of recovery.
Yeah, I mean, before we finish this section, I've got to talk to you about IFK Göteborg, because, I mean, again, if you go back sort of the last couple of years, even 2 or 3 years, they really seem like this selling club these days, and it really, like you said, it's looking like a bit of a geriatric sort of ward, isn't it? The guys that are coming in, it's certainly the no spring chickens, are they? Is this? I don't like it. I've got to be honest. I prefer to see, you know, youngsters come in and develop players rather than bring in some veterans. But can the likes of Marcus Berg, Oscar Wendt, Gustav Svensson, can they really make an immediate impact for Göteborg? Do they need that type of player?
Well, we've done 101 episodes now, Steve, and you know me. We've done, I think 10 to watch. How many of my players have I ever picked over 21? I mean, you know, youth is my focus. So, yeah, I'm not a massive fan of it. I think, but Berg, I can understand. You know, in the games so far, he's looked like a decent focal point. Probably from his own career point of view, it was time to come back home. He got a lot of stick in the Euros. He was what you look at Saka and Rashford, people like that. Berg took a lot of abuse in the Euros from Swedish fans who were just sort of saying he's finished. And that does take a toll on players and their families, and I think that did have an impact on him. He got dropped by Sweden, I think, at one point, and these things can take an impact. And he's back home now. He does still have a part to play. I think he's a good sort of leader. He's good in the air. He offers something different for EFK in that sense. He like I say, he nearly scored the winner against Hammarby. But overall, I don't like where they go. I say this. I seem to say this every sort of 3 weeks. I don't really like where EFK are going. I don't know what they want to be as a club right now. And when I was living there, I had obviously it was difficult to maybe give my opinions because I know some people there. But obviously, the more distance you get, the more honest you can be. And just every year, I seem to see them going in different directions. They got a fantastic academy. Really good people working at the academy level, and they always bring through good youngsters, but they just always seem to kind of top that up with veterans, because they're a team that have had massive success in the past. So a lot of their kind of top names they come back, you know what I mean? They want to come back and restore the glory days, but sometimes, those glory days are over, leave them where they are. And some of them have come back and sort of retired. They've had some bad luck this season with a couple of the players who came back have already retired through injury and stuff. So, Vernbloom struggled and I think Johansson struggled as well. So, I just feel they're a little bit slow and sluggish, EFK in their midfield areas. I thought Hammarby should have overrun them, really. I was shocked Hammarby.
They're not going to get any quicker, are they, bringing in oldies like that?
No, that's the thing. And, Yusuf was a massive part of their game. Tollinson's a good player. Maybe he'll come back on loan at some point. But Wickstrom, he was on loan at AFC Eskilstuna. But Ashley Coffey, I think on that episode, said he really, really rates Wickstrom. Bromby have picked up a good signing there, I think, if Ashley's remarks are to be believed, because he's seen him at close quarters. So yeah, they just seem to be leaking a lot of their young talent and bringing in sort of experienced players. And I've had to downgrade my prediction, and I thought EFK would maybe be top 7. I don't think they'll be that now. I think they'll be around 8th, 9th. 10th.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking down at some of the transfers. The rather unfortunately named Varberg have signed a player from AZ called Des Kuntz. Rather unfortunate name, that isn't. He's actually started 3 games for them already. There's some really random signings at times, isn't there? Yahav Gerfinkel, a left back from Maccabi Haifa, has come to Norrköping. But at the other end of the scale, Halmstad have hardly had any activity at all. So, in fact, none. Absolutely no arrivals, no departures. So, winners and losers from this window, briefly, Jonathan?
I think an individual loser, Jack Lane. I worry about him. The 19-year-old, he's still got time at Amiens, but not worked out from Hacken. He's been returned on loan. I just worry about where his career is going. Such an exciting youngster, still young, but I really hope he can sort of find a home, to be honest, because he's just moved around so much the last 2 years or so and just doesn't seem to have found a home. I had hopes that he'd get into Hacken's team, but it didn't happen. Hacken, by the way, have signed a player from Nigeria called Franklin Tebo Uchenna, who they've got big hopes for. They were scouting in Nigeria at a tournament, and they found him and they brought him in on loan with a 4-year option to buy. So, he apparently stood out in a tournament there, a domestic tournament, and they came back and signed him. So they've done a little bit of business. Samuel Gustafsson as well is back in Sweden. Winners overall, I would say, I think Malmo done some decent business. I think that, they've strengthened in areas they need to strengthen. Losers, I'd say, Djurgården losing Witchery is massive. That's the biggest downgrade, I think. Elfsborg have lost, but I think they've already kind of brought in a couple of replacements. They already knew that Okumi would leave. So I don't think that's going to affect them too much.
Kalmar picked up over £1 million for Fidan Aliti to Zurich. I don't know if that was already like a loan or something. That's quite a lot of money, isn't it, for Kalmar? Yes, he was on loan there. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. He had already. I think that was already been done. They haven't quite brought in anyone else. They brought in a young forward, but not too much else. There's not much time left. Örebro have announced that they want to do some more business before the window shuts. They've been quite busy, actually, Örebro. They brought in Jiloan Hamad is back in Sweden. They brought in a player called Nasiru Moro. Basara is back, as always. He seems to always go off to somewhere like Saudi Arabia to get paid and then returns after 6 months. He was in UAE, I think, at Hatta Club for 6 months on a nice fat contract, and now he's back at Örebro again. So seems to have some sort of cushy arrangement there. So fair play to him. But those kind of players are the kind of players they need some creativity, because they've been desperate this first half of the season. So I think they've done okay. And of course, then we end it with Östersund, who still have their transfer ban and can't buy anyone. But interestingly enough, Charlie Colkett's back. Now, he had refused to play for the club in the first half of the season, basically, and came back to England and declared he was leaving, basically. And I think he was on trial at Coventry at one point. Seems like it's not worked out for him. And he's now back, and he played against Hacken. So yeah, I guess that whole... I guess they have got one transfer in that sense. A very, very good player on his day, the Englishman. But I think he's been a bit of a naughty boy in the last 6 months or so, really. Maybe thought he was a bit bigger than Östersund's, and he's now back there on a new 1-year deal.
I mean, regarding Jack Lane, I would love to see one of these clubs in Allsvenskan go for him on loan again, on deadline day, because it isn't working at Amiens. I think he started one game and then he's back on the bench for 2. I read somewhere that the language barrier is a problem for him in France. In fact, the whole club, they've got some issues with different languages upsetting, but it's a very weird place for him to be. Amiens in France doesn't feel like the type of play, not the sort of league for a goal scorer, fast player like him. I would love to see an Allsvenskan team go in for him, but I don't think it's going to happen, is it? But
even Superettan, I think he's the kind of player who was so exciting when he was at Bromma Poikina, but he left too early. A bit like Benjamin Nygren, if you look at where he is now, I don't think he's really progressed. I would have liked to see Arhin maybe even going to Superettan team would suit him, just find a home for him. I always seem to see him and Romain Gall out and about. If that makes Gall's obviously, I think he's left Örebro now. They always seem to be, the two players who are they offer a lot of excitement, but just hasn't really worked out for them in the last sort of year, 2 years. Gall's still only 26. He's gone back to Malmo now, but I can't see him getting too much game time there. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, there's been some really interesting transfers.
I think that pretty much wraps up the episode, Jonathan. Very good stuff, as always, my friend. Where can you find the key socials accounts of yourself?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter you can find us on Twitter at Nordic Football. Patreon as well, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. We may have a bonus show coming this week. We'll see how we feel. But stay tuned on that on Twitter. Keep an eye out. And obviously, as always, I'm on Twitter at JF Football, JFFUTBOL.
Yeah, you can find me at MeatMan Soccer on Twitter. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the episode. And we'll be back again, hopefully, next week. So take care, stay safe, and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.